Who are going to be the main villains for each individual DCU TV series? This is technically the third video in my villains videos I've been making lately. We've already done one about the DCU main villain for the overall 10 or however many years this lasts, and I've already done a video about each individual villain that could appear in each individual DCU movie, so now we're going to end this off with the shows. The shows were a little bit harder because a lot of these are groups and stories we've never seen from DC before in live action or just in general, and when I say that, I'm even meaning comic books, because a lot of people don't know a lot about some of these characters and a lot about the villains that they have. And whereas I was saying it a lot throughout my last video, I'm just gonna say it here so I don't have to keep repeating myself. A lot of the villains I come up with for these shows are going to be obscure because, like I've explained, James Gunn has a very different mind when it comes to creating comic book films or content. A lot of the characters we get might be very obscure. They're gonna be characters that even hardcore fans like myself don't really know much about. So let's start with Creature Commandos, which on its own is already a very obscure group. This is a group in DC that I don't think many people read at all. I don't think many people know about them at all, and I don't think anybody was expecting this group to get a show of its own, even if it is animated. As it was mentioned in his presentation, these characters will likely show up in live action one way or the other. Who knows how much bearing this animation show will have on the overall DCU? I'm sure there's going to be a couple of things that are going to carry over from animation to live action, but as if the characters in the group are already very unknown, their villains are going to be even more unknown. I, of course, know of the Creature Commandos, but I do not read them. I do not care for them. So in that case, they are not my specialty. I don't know much about them. I probably couldn't even genuinely tell you a main character part of that group. What I do know is this group is technically from World War II. They fought the Nazis. I don't know if James Gunn's DCU is going to have the Creature Commandos be back in World War II. If he's gonna maybe move them forward a bit in the future and they were part of the Vietnam War. I don't know if he's even just going to simply make them modern day and they take place in the year 2024, 2025. I don't know what he's doing. Although, simple enough, they could just have governmental villains. They could have maybe rogue factions of the government gone wrong and they have to take care of it. When I was looking at some of their villains, it does seem like a lot of people they fight either come from other planets, are from a different year, past or future, or are in fact just from a different timeline and universe in general. So I'm not going to get into too much of their details. If you want to know more about these characters, I suggest you go look them up. But the three villains I came up for the Creature Commandos is Hiathus, Queen Bee, and Zotar. Hiathus comes from a planet called Alstar, and they are basically half human, half plant hybrids, and she's a conqueror. She's actually technically an old age Justice League villain, but she comes to Earth trying to conquer it, and that could be a very good opening for the Creature Commandos, a small-time group that no one knows, fighting a small-time villain no one knows. I know the idea of her is big, trying to conquer Earth, but nobody knows her character, and it could fit for animation. Queen Bee is another extraterrestrial being that comes to Earth. She actually is a Justice League villain as well, back in the day, but now in modern-day comic books, she actually has a lot of ties with the company Hive. Yes, I know, very clever, Queen Bee, Hive working together, but Hive does have a lot of ties with the government. Creature Commandos being a government faction could have to fight a character like Queen Bee. And then finally, you have Zotar, which is once again another Justice League villain, but he comes from the year 11,000, far into the future. He comes back in time to wreak havoc. And the main reason why I even chose him is because he's fitting the bill with this time travel, extraterrestrial stuff. But when you just look at him, he does look like a character that James Gunn would want to use. At the end of the day, Creature Commandos is a very different group than any of us are really used to. They can use any villain they like. Then we have the Waller Show, and I think the interesting thing about this series is that the villain to Waller could literally be anyone, anything, any group, any team. It could be anybody. The amount of people she has been villains with, she's also been friends with or allies with. Amanda Waller is a very neutral character, and as much as she can go out of her way trying to kill you, she can go out of her way to try and save your life and work with you. From the small details we've gotten from the Waller TV show, it does sound like her villains are going to simply just be the government, but in what way is it going to be the American government? I can only assume it's gotta be some faction that not many people know about. It's gotta be some sort of inside job in the government who wants to get rid of her. It could be Argus, it could be Checkmate, it could even be Task Force X or Suicide Squad, really. Maybe now she does not have control of a new Suicide Squad. It is now the government who does, and they're trying to wipe any knowledge of previous Suicide Squad teams and missions. I don't really know, but it's definitely going to be government-based. And if you do want to know more on a theory I have for not even just the Waller Show, but the future of maybe these smaller TV shows and this storyline, check out my Janice Directive video where I do talk heavily about what could be going on with Amanda Waller and the Suicide Squad, and even a little bit of the Justice League. Now, we also got Paradise Lost, which is supposed to be the prequel to Wonder Woman, and once again, this is a show that not too many details have been given to us. It could be a prequel in the sense that Diana is a young girl. It could be a prequel that it is hundreds of years in the past or thousands of years. I don't really know what's going on here. But the one thing we definitely do know is James Gunn has related it to a Game of Thrones-esque type show. So to me, that just means it's going to be violent, bloody, and graphic. This is another show that it could be simply one thing or it could be many things. And that simply one thing is, it could just be Amazonians versus Amazonians. Maybe there is some sort of Game of Thrones Iron Throne that the Amazonians are fighting for. The power that Hippolyta has over Themyscira, Wonder Woman's mother, maybe that is the power that these Amazonians are fighting for, and then we'll get to see different factions and houses or clans of Amazonian warriors fighting for that throne. In Wonder Woman's history, there are a lot of very popular Amazonian warriors and Amazonian women, even Amazonians who have had magical abilities. There's way too many to talk about and count. You can go look that up for yourself, but maybe they try and involve some of that stuff in some way. Or I was even thinking maybe you introduce the Greek gods. Maybe you get Zeus and Artemis and Hades and Ares into the picture. And really what it is it's the Greek gods manipulating the Amazonian warriors to go to war with one another. Now, Waller and Paradise Lost, the amount of people and villains that could be involved in those shows is just way too many to count, and we would be here forever. So that's why I really tried to sum them up. But now we head into the Green Lantern show, and there are a couple of specific villains I think would suit this show. Once again, first and foremost, the easiest one could simply just be other Lantern Corps. If it's taking place on Earth or around the Sol system in general, we could just be seeing the Lanterns fight Sinestro and the Sinestro Corps. We could see them having to fight the Red Lanterns. We could see them having to fight Larfleeze. It could be that simple. Then again, a war against a Lantern Corps usually involves Corps versus Corps, or even the Justice League to get involved. So I don't know how they would use a war against one of the other colored lanterns on a smaller scale. Now, the one villain I have in mind, which is actually technically a Justice League villain, but they could be using this villain to open up a future threat for the Justice League. The villain in this movie could be a smaller scale Amazo. Amazo is a very powerful villain for the Justice League because it inherits all the powers, abilities, and intellect of the heroes and basically just uses it against them. Maybe what this show could introduce is an Amazo that copies the Green Lanterns, and now they basically just have to fight themselves. And then what happens throughout the show, and especially at the end of the show, is that the Amazo learns of other super beings out there, creates a mind of its own, if you will, and actually starts to inherit powers from other beings, which would eventually cause the Justice League needing to team up and take down this one threat. And even though at the end of the Green Lantern show they are discovering a terrifying threat, maybe they also discover a threat for the first Justice League film in Amazo. I really doubt this one, but I'm just throwing anything out there. The next one I have is Dr. Destiny, and he is another one who has had run-ins with the Justice League, but what makes his character very interesting is he is dream-based. He can enter and control your dreams and really distort a lot of things for you, and I think that would be something very interesting that Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart would have to overcome. Two lanterns having to fight their dreams, and maybe in this dream space trying to construct 3D or 4D objects to fight things that really are not there, they're just all in their mind. And if this show is primarily Earth-based, Dr. Destiny would keep them very grounded. And then the third villain I have for this show is Arthur Light. Now, Arthur Light, when he was first created, was actually seen as a joke villain, but as time went on, he became much more serious. Arthur Light can manipulate light energy, and really, lanterns have light. Their rings project that. He could potentially really humanize Hal and John without the ability to use their rings anymore. And also, too, as a threat for the future of the DCU, Arthur Light is actually the catalyst for Final Crisis. And if we are truly entering some sort of multiversal crisis event, maybe 5, 8, 10 years in the future, Arthur Light could be responsible and involved in this situation, and I think he could be a very good starting villain for the Green Lanterns. And now finally, we have Booster Gold, and whereas a lot of people know who Booster Gold is, I'd say there is less people who really know everything in the history about Booster Gold himself. Booster Gold has a very memorable appearance. He might not have the most memorable history and background information. With this character, I feel like you could get away with any villain you wanted, and people would simply just be happy to watch a Booster Gold show. Although I do have two villains that Booster Gold could encounter. As it's been explained, Booster Gold is a loser from the 25th century who steals technology, becomes very powerful in a myriad of different areas of abilities, comes to our century and becomes a beloved hero. When he comes to our century, the first villains he could potentially be up against is the Royal Flush Gang. Now, a lot of us, including myself, and I'm sure many of you would find this very cool because we've seen the Royal Flush Gang in the Justice League animated cartoon. They are a very interesting group, but more importantly for Booster Gold, he has a lot of run-ins with Ace, the tank of that group, the big boy. Booster Gold, and not just Booster, but Blue Beetle as well, have teamed up against Ace many times. There are so many Royal Flush Gangs. There's the first Royal Flush Gang, there's the second Royal Flush Gang, there's the third Royal Flush Gang, there's an Infinite Crisis Royal Flush Gang. There's so many different versions of them. Whatever version of the Flush Gang that Gunn wants to use, go for it, just do it, we'll be happy with any. But what it simply could be is the Royal Flush Gang is just running around robbing high-end companies, and this is a fantastic opportunity for Booster Gold to be that beloved hero in our century and he needs to take down the group. There's nothing special about that idea. There's nothing that maybe really stands out, but it could be a solid beginning point for Booster Gold, who, once again, many may know by name and reputation, but not many know what he's about, who he really is. And maybe in that situation, you need to start slow. Last but not least, my second villain for the Booster Gold show could be a guy named Broderick. And he is a federal agent from the year 2462 who is sent back in time to retrieve the time sphere that Booster Gold stole to come back to our century. And there could actually be a very unique dynamic here, since in their century, Broderick actually admired Booster Gold. But after the theft and the crime that Booster Gold committed to come back here, Broderick no longer likes him and now needs to fight him to bring him back into custody in their century. I think why Broderick could be a good idea for a Booster Gold show is because it introduces us a little bit more to the 25th century. This really does underline the fact that there is time travel in the DC universe. I don't think anyone would be surprised by that. I don't really think we need to see time travel to know the DC universe would have time travel, but this could open the doors for future DC projects having time travel. I'm not always the biggest fan of time travel. I think it's a lazy plot device sometimes, but you can use time travel in very interesting ways, so hopefully they do that. So there you have it, everyone. Those are some of my villain options for these TV shows. This one was probably the hardest one because of how strange, obscure, and kind of far left field some of these TV shows are. So now, of course, like usual, it is your turn to let me know in the comments below what you think of some of my choices and what some of your choices are for these TV shows. But that is all I got for you on this one, everyone. So until next time, I will talk to you all very soon.